All right, everyone, we start off the day with something that's a little bit more on the humorous side, than some of the stories that I have to cover. With Brenda Fitzgerald, actually, of the CDC. The head of the CDC herself apparently was trading in Japanese tobacco stocks. This obviously was a conflict of interest, so they're like, I don't think this works, and then she had to resign. She wants that pension. It's sort of like McCabe. Typically what happens, unless it's really, really severe, bureaucrats don't get outright fired from their positions. They're expected to terminate their own positions in order to keep their pension. People within Congress, of course, Nixon. When Nixon resigned, instead of letting himself get kicked out of office and be the only president to, have that problem, he's like, well, at least he still gets his presidential pension. That's some consolation. You're looked at as one of the great boogeymen of American history, but, at least you saved the money. So Brenda Fitzgerald won't be remembered probably too fondly, and here's my thought. As somebody who was addicted to smoking and who has quit, I'll say this. There are some people that they're like, well, I used to smoke so terrible, and then they become like Puritans about it, and they're like, well, anything to stop the scourge of tobacco is okay. Like, tax the tobacco, raise the age of smoking tobacco, ban people from smoking when driving or walking around. I'm not into all of that sort of stuff. I think that education is the way to go. Ultimately, though, in many cases, it boils down to simply a choice someone is going to have to make for themselves. No amount of looking at lung cancer or gum cancer convinced me to stop smoking. Ultimately, is, hey, my dad had a mini stroke. He's been a lifelong moderate smoker. Seeing that, it's a little bit of a wake-up call, so I decided to stop. And I'm glad that I did. I'm not puritanical about it. But in the case of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, it would be pretty bad to have somebody heading that who's trading stock in a product known. It's not a speculation. It's not propaganda. It actually does cause massive health issues. It's one of the leading killers of people in the entire world. Now, if somebody is just, partaking in their Native American ritual tobacco once a year or something, probably not a problem. But, when you're constantly filling your lungs with smoke, it can't be good for you. Some people have tried to say, both sort of militant smokers, which is funny, and, of course, executives from tobacco industries, they're like, oh, it's no different from smoking anything else. Okay, well, again, if you were smoking, 10 or 20 cigarettes a day of any other dried vegetative matter, that probably wouldn't be good for you either. It wouldn't even give you a rush. By the way, kids, to stop you from smoking here, the one big thing you got to keep in mind is that after a fairly short period of time of being a smoker, you're no longer getting a rush at all. You simply are smoking to feel what the person who's not smoking just feels anyway, all of the time. So as in low stress, what happens is for a while, you're supplementing your body's anti-stress sort of chemicals by smoking. So it feels really good at first, but then that begins to decline. You end up smoking more to get the same buzz. Eventually, unless you intend to be a chain smoker, you're not really able to do anything about it. At some point, you got to peak out, so that you're still giving yourself more of that hit. But it'd be a monumental amount. I know, what was his name? I can't remember the actor's name. Marty something from Young Frankenstein. I know I'm going to be crucified by some people. Marty Feldman. He apparently smoked 6 or 7 packs of cigarettes a day. And look at how it fucked him up. John Wayne, I think, wasn't he a 5-pack a day smoker or some insane amount? And then also, ended up dying of cancer. Although some people think it was nuclear testing related. Who knows? I think that was him. But no, smoking is no joke. It's certainly not something. If you're not a smoker, don't start smoking. If a person is already a smoker, I don't really want to say, well, we need to make it cost $20 a pack and ridicule them and say, well, you're only going to be able to smoke in your own home. And even then, you have kids in your house, so you can't smoke in the same room because that's like assault or something. And one thing I've seen, and I think this is dangerous. I know that I'm not really talking about the CDC director so much at this point, but, that's a fairly limited story, but I'm giving a few views here. One dangerous thing that the anti-smoking forces have begun to do is fixate. For a while, it was secondhand smoke, the idea that if you were smoking and someone else is next to you, that could be harmful. Yeah, although I would hazard a guess probably to a more limited level than actually being a smoker, unless you're constantly around their clam bake sessions. But now they're fixating on the idea of third-hand smoke, the idea that tobacco residue from the smoke can interact and release pollutants or cause cancer, skin cancer or something. That's going to sound really, really out there to people, and the education we already have on smoking is pretty ironclad and is working over time. Look, millennials and Gen Z, significantly lower proportions of people in my generation, and especially the upcoming generation, smoke, as opposed to boomers and Gen X. If someone gets into their 50s, 60s, and they're still smoking regularly, they're probably at that point not going to quit. But somebody like myself, I was, heading up towards 30. I'm like, well, why don't I do myself a solid and get rid of this one particularly nasty vice from my life? It might save my life. I'm too busy having fun fucking working. And, if my voice gets screwed up from cancer, it's going to be hard to make the YouTube videos. If I get like some eye, you can get like glaucoma and shit. If I have eye problems, it's going to make it hard to edit books and, do everything else that I fucking enjoy other than, maybe listen to music and be a vegetable. Doesn't sound like my bag. Now, of course, you could end up getting lung cancer just by living in a big city. So if you're like living in Beijing and you're a smoker, probably quitting smoking would be less beneficial than quitting Beijing. For most other people in the world, yeah, don't start. It was funny though, the CDC had, and people were like making Trump statements because they're like, oh, this is Trump's America. The head of the CDC is like, applauding tobacco stocks. It was a little bit weird. It is a conflict of interest. It doesn't have anything to do with Trump, but I mean, come on, you gotta resign at that point. That's like if the head of the Pentagon were a former like hippie peace activist. I don't think they'd like it very much. It'd be a conflict of interest when your job is to start wars. You couldn't then be a total peacenik. You couldn't do the job. Likewise, the CDC head is tasked with trying to prevent people from smoking, preferably. You got to realize that all of these, like, it's not just smoking. It's also alcohol. People drinking robot piss, maybe. No, I love robot piss. People, unhealthy lifestyles, sedentary lifestyles, wrong food choices and stuff. There are all sorts of things that we do in American society and elsewhere that really fucks us up over time. It's one reason I like to get my vegetables. Thankfully, I actually like things like asparagus and Brussels sprouts. So hopefully I'll be sane and capable of walking into my 70s. That would be nice. That's about all. Peace out.